Hi, I'm Julian.
And I'm James Ashworth.
We're from the Brunner Investment Trust, and we have a bunch of questions to be answered today that are hidden in this goblet or urn. We're not really sure what it's called. James, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'll pick the first question. Let's hope it's a really nice, difficult one. Okay, first question. Oh, this is a nice, easy one for you to start with.
Okay.
But I think I know what your answer is going to be. So the first question is predictions on 2025 sporting events.
Liverpool clean sweep, Luke Littler in the darts.
I couldn't say that. That was very predictable. That was exactly what I was going to say you would have said.
Yeah. For anyone who's watching, by the way, there are some investment-related questions in here as well. It's not just us pontificating about the outcome for the future. Okay, so this is a question, just in investment, how important is it to make sure you invest in uncorrelated risks and sectors? So if you could sort of explain, A, what that means, and
Yes.
B, why you think it matters, and maybe give some examples, that would be terrific.
Yeah, that's a really good broad question. So obviously, as an investors, we are assembling a portfolio for Brunner, which is what we position as being an all-weather diversified portfolio. We don't want to have too much exposure to any one risk, or any one geography, any one company, any one theme, which could lead where there could be negative events or negative developments that would lead to sort of disappointment. And so what we do when we construct the portfolio is try and manage the amount of exposure we have, what percentage of the portfolio is in different areas. So one good example would be travel and leisure, where there's a lot of secular growth as rising levels of income and reopening after COVID leads people to travel more. And we found lots of wonderful businesses in this space that we'd love to hold large positions in, but we are very conscious that that travel is cyclical. When we go through economic downturns, travel volumes decline, and we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. Effectively, this help when we construct the portfolio, we try and limit our exposure to any one factor, any one theme, any one area such as travel, to ensure that as a portfolio in aggregate, we are able to deliver attractive returns over the long run.
Yeah, sure. So I always think within the portfolio, for example, we have Admiral, the UK car insurance business. And I suppose what would be the worst case scenario there? So a deterioration in competitive environment or a gigantic UK-wide hailstorm that sort of takes out lots of the vehicle stock in the UK. And of course, that's not correlated to interest rates or GDP growth or anything else. I always think that's a sort of good example of something which should flourish or have some tougher times in a way that's just nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah.
I think the extent to which we can weave in numerous ideas like that into the portfolio is really, really helpful. So essentially, it's just the old adage, do not put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Absolutely. Admiral might be cyclical, but it's a different cycle to many other businesses we own and maybe to the broader economy as well.
Yep. Okay. Great.
My turn?
Your turn?
Okay. What do you think? Do you want a difficult question or an easy question?
I don't mind.
Okay.
It's the surprises.
Oh, you're getting all the easy questions.
Okay.
The question is, what are you hoping will be under the Christmas tree?
Oh, I want for nothing. I really don't mind. Actually, my wife and I have an agreement that we don't get each other Christmas presents. But she only does that because it's her birthday 2 days later, so she knows she'll be getting something. And I always say to the kids, don't get me anything either. So I don't mind.
No books on the Christmas list this year?
I've got a reading queue about this. I mean, it's like 2 shelves that long of things I have not yet read, so I don't need any more books.
Yes. There is a Japanese word for the obsession with buying books that you have not yet. Adding more books to
I need to know that. I need to know that word.
Unfortunately, it's Japanese, and I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so you're getting all the investment ones. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of value chain within artificial intelligence, and maybe some thoughts there about how that links to the Brunner Investment Trust, how we're doing things there.
That's a great topic and one that we could talk for hours about, I'm sure.
Yep.
So artificial intelligence has obviously been a hot theme in 2024. Actually, really since the release of ChatGPT in late 2022, we've seen a surge in interest in AI and what impact AI could have on businesses and our lives as individuals. So far, the big winner from AI has been NVIDIA, which makes the semiconductors or designs the semiconductors which power lots of the artificial intelligence. That's become a multi-trillion-dollar company in a very short period of time. There's huge demands for their chips as the large cloud software providers and lots of corporates buy as many of these GPUs as they possibly can in order to roll out their own AI solutions. It's not a business we've invested in Brunner. It's one we've taken a long, hard look at and looked at multiple times. And I think the real question for us is, although the business today, NVIDIA, is a phenomenal business generating huge amounts of cash, it's quite unclear whether in the long term, the manufacturer of the hardware effectively will be the one that captures lots of the value. And I think it's informative to look back at sort of prior technological changes when we're sort of thinking about who captures the value in a technology revolution. And most obvious example would be if you go back 25 years now to the dot-com boom, where we saw a huge amount of investment, firstly in the hardware. We saw transatlantic fiber optic cables being laid, Cisco systems, which made the physical routers to connect all the computers together, briefly became the most valuable company in the world. And at the beginning of the technological revolution and the growth of the internet, it was the hardware makers who looked to be the main beneficiaries. But over time, the real value has been captured by people who found ways to build software on top of that hardware. So today, most of the most valuable companies in the world, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Netflix, it's Amazon, whether it's Google, have all built technologies software technologies on top of the hardware infrastructure that's been built. And so when we look forward from here back to the present day, I think the question with AI is, what is the use cases, or what are the use cases that are going to be the big drivers of demand, and who will be the manufacturers or the designers of that software layer? So we're spending lots of time thinking about where AI is likely to be used widely and who will be capturing that value. And we've seen comments from the chief technology officer of Microsoft saying that he's sure that today the trillion-dollar companies of the future in AI are being created as we speak. And that's very likely. And we're obviously spending a lot of time thinking about who these companies are likely to be, which companies will really benefit from this AI wave that we've seen over the last couple of years.
I think there's a book. Speaking of books, there's a book, Carlota Perez, who's a Venezuelan academic, I think, who's written about these technology transitions and has made the point that quite often it's the people who actually build the physical technology run into financial trouble. And the value is created by entrepreneurs whose imagination is unleashed by these incredible new technologies. And we've definitely seen that with the internet, I think. I think as well, it's probably important to mention that whilst we haven't invested in NVIDIA, we've invested in two of their key enablers. So NVIDIA don't actually manufacture computer chips. They're manufactured by Taiwan Semi, which is a big Brunner holding. And then to manufacture those chips, Taiwan Semi uses machines from a company called ASML, a Dutch company, who make these incredible machines that enable the manufacture of these sort of bleeding edge chips. Lots to think about there. AI has clearly been one of the themes of 2024. An enormous amount of hype, very, very high valuations, a lot of instances, a lot of speculative mania. It'd be very interesting to see how that all evolves in the years to come.
With hundreds of billions of dollars have been already invested in AI, we are going to need to start seeing companies generate returns for that investment.
Okay.
Right, shall I see if I can get you an investing question this time?
Please do.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, thank you.
This is actually an investing question.
Oh, wow, okay.
An unusual one.
Okay.
What's the most unusual stock in your portfolio and why? I don't know whether it's why it's unusual or why is it in your portfolio. Maybe you can answer both those questions.
I think it's probably why is it unusual? Probably or two examples. One, we have a company, Baltic Classifieds Group. So Baltic Classifieds, it is what it is. It is what it says. It operates in the Baltic states, so Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And if you think about it, in the UK, you have classified websites like Rightmove and Auto Trader, which, by the way, are absolutely incredible businesses, some of the most profitable businesses in the world. This is the equivalent in that region. And the reason it's interesting is A, the economies of those places are flourishing. But B, they have their own languages. So, the likes of Facebook or eBay have sort of no interest in these small markets. And as such, they have very, very high share in the listings of houses and cars. And we know from the examples of Auto Trader, which is another Brunner holding, and things like Rightmove, is that once you have that critical mass, all consumers go there to look for a house or a car, and all the people selling houses and cars therefore list their inventory on the website. And generally the model is that they pay to list that inventory, and because it's a digital business with no physical costs of goods, the margins can be absolutely exceptional. So that's quite an unusual business. The other one that springs to mind is perhaps Brambles. This is an Australian business. This is extraordinarily mundane, but they operate a network of, the wooden pallets that are used to distribute goods to retailers. So literally a really sort of mundane little niche in the global economy, but these are used to transport goods around the world. They're a standard size. And it sort of makes sense in most countries to have one company that basically manages these networks. And so the idea is if you're the cheese maker in Wisconsin and you want to ship your cheese to Costco in California, then you do it on a pallet, and you don't want to retrieve that pallet afterwards, so therefore it goes into a pool, and the operator of the pool picks up the pallet and then reuses it, and I don't know, maybe some computer goods go from California to Chicago or whatever. And it's a business that's another type of network. It naturally veers towards a monopoly. But when you think about it, it's a pretty odd little business that no one would ever really think about. And I love having businesses like this, slightly off the beaten track. I think that's one of the great, the great things about running money globally is, we've got this company that's listed in the US, but it's basically in the Baltic states. We've got this Australian business that operates pallet networks. Its biggest business actually is in the US as well. And the world's full of these little gems. The world. If you have your eyes open all the time, you can uncover these great little businesses around the world that seem to have great competitive positions and trade at reasonable valuations.
And those are both really good examples of network businesses where you're connecting effectively buyers and sellers, or both sides of the supply and demand equation, and therefore it's actually quite hard to disrupt that, because if someone enters that market, they lack scale. They need to get both both ends of the equation onto the platform, and that's quite a difficult economic challenge. There's others, like Visa would be another example, where you need to get the merchants and you need to get the card holders to be on your network. If you're trying to launch a new competitor, it's a very, very big challenge. So the economic moats for some of these businesses are really vast, and makes the makes the risk on those cash flows much lower.
Exactly. So the key to good quality businesses tends to be barriers to entry, sustainable competitive advantages, just something that means that they're not subject to the full gamut of competition, which in capitalism is intended in a way to erode profitable businesses, because new businesses sort of copy them. So barriers to entry always key. Right. One for you, James. What's the last book you read?
The last book I read? That's a good question. And this is a very niche topic. Okay. But it's an interesting one, I think, though. There's a book that was written a few years ago called The Box, which is the history of containers. You've just talked about shipping on pallets. Many of those pallets, if they go...
This wasn't like a bestseller, I don't think, was it?
It wasn't a bestseller when it was issued. And I think Bill Gates and a few others then recommended it on their reading list, and it saw a resurgence. But it's quite interesting in how a technology that's actually maybe not particularly complicated or would appear, very, very difficult to do, leads to vast changes across wide parts of the economy. So the shipping container was began being used in about the mid-1950s, but hadn't really had any traction before the mid-1960s. And then in a very short period of time, coinciding really with the Vietnam War, you went from a period where goods were largely shipped what was called break bulk. So you had a ship and someone literally tried to shove, your Wisconsin provider's, roll of cheese in one corner and a bit of whiskey on top, just really try to fill all the space on the ship. To having most of the world's shipping really done in containers. That made it much quicker to unload and offload goods onto ships. It reduced the amount of theft and damage of items when they were being transported. It really opened up, effectively enabled globalization as we saw it in the late 20th century, of goods coming from Asia to Europe and to the US. It changed also lots of the major inner city port areas. So if you think about central London, not far from where we filmed this, we had major docks in central London. We had St Catherine Dock, we had London Dock, Surrey Dock, and within a very short period of time, really within a space of 2 or 3 years, they were replaced with container ports in Tilbury and Felixstowe. Changed the entire nature of distribution of businesses as well. No longer needed to be right next to the port, because if you were based in the Midlands, you could just take your items off a container, your shipping container off a boat at Felixstowe port and drive it to your factory. So really, well, it's quite a understated revolution for what was quite a simple bit of technology. We talked also a little bit about who gets the benefit of this, and interestingly, most of those companies that pioneered that shipping revolution went bankrupt after having invested too much in capacity. It was a commoditized market. Competition was intense. There were no barriers to entry beyond just buying a ship, it wasn't a very good thing for the companies who made the investment, but for consumers, it's probably led to more choice of goods and lower prices. So it was a very perhaps a bit of an unusual book, off the beaten track.
Well, there's comparisons to the pallets we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
This is fascinating stuff, obviously.
Logistics.
Logistics. I know there's a book, Tim Harford, who's a columnist in the FT, very good economist, and he wrote a book called 50 Things That Made the Modern Economy, and I know that containers is one of those. So that is interesting. Yeah, thank you.
I think we've got a few questions left. I'll see if I can get a investing question out of here. This is a statement rather than a question, but I think we'll try and turn it into a question. So the statement is US interest rates coming down. I think that has been a theme over the last couple of years as we've had inflation come under control. We're starting to be at that point where interest rates go onto a downward cycle. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what we're expecting for interest rates and the impact that might have on some of our investments in the Brunner portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, we very much try and construct a portfolio that isn't really dependent on sort of interest rates or GDP growth, because we don't feel we've got any ability to predict that, certainly not in the near term. There's definitely a narrative that interest rates are coming down, and I would say it's likely that the Bank of England cuts its rates, the Fed in the US cuts its rates. But what's interesting is that longer term interest rates, so 5 and 10-year interest rates, haven't actually come down that much. So at the moment, I think bond markets, A, they're thinking that maybe inflation is a little bit more stubborn than they would have liked, but B, as well, there's a bit of a risk that governments start to monetize their debt by stimulating inflation, maybe hurting their currencies. So the actual risk of debt is becoming high, even for government debt. And so it's interesting, in the States, actually, the interest rate hasn't come down that much. So if you're a US home buyer, for example, so the convention is in the US, if you buy a house, you do so with a 30-year mortgage, 30-year fixed mortgage. Unlike in the UK, where it might be a 3 or a 5-year fix. So it's a 30-year mortgage, but it costs 7% a year. And that compares to 3% prior to COVID. So it's still quite high. Still means that the US housing market, for example, is sort of chewed up. A lot of reluctance for people to move homes when they have to pay so much to do so. Great. Well, Thanks very much, James. I think we're out of time. Interesting talking to you. By the way, we talk every day. We sit right next to each other discussing investment ideas. But thanks again.
Thank you, Julian.
Cheers.